The pathophysiology of lactic acidosis. Lactic acidosis is a condition characterized by the accumulation of lactate in the blood due to impaired metabolism, resulting in a decreased blood pH. For normal lactate metabolism, lactate is produced during anaerobic glycolysis when glucose is metabolized to pyruvate. Under normal conditions, pyruvate is converted to acetyl-CoA and enters the citric acid cycle for energy production. A small amount of pyruvate is reduced to lactate by lactate dehydrogenase. Lactate is cleared by the liver, where it is converted back to glucose or oxidized to CO2 and water. There are a few causes of lactic acidosis, one of them being increased lactate production. This could be by tissue hypoxia, when there's inadequate oxygen delivery that leads to increased anaerobic metabolism. It can also be increased metabolic demand, which includes excessive energy demand, such as like during seizures or intense exercise. There's impaired mitochondrial function, which includes the toxins like cyanide, carbon monoxide, mitochondrial diseases, or certain drugs like metformin or antiretrovirals. Another cause of lactic acidosis can be decreased lactate clearance. This could be when there's liver dysfunction, like impaired lactate conversion to glucose or oxidation, and kidney dysfunction as well, which is when there's like reduced lactate clearance. Some mechanisms of acidosis include excess lactate production or reduced clearance, leading to accumulation in the blood. Lactate is an anion accompanied by hydrogen ions, which lower the blood's pH. This disrupts the acid-base balance, leading to metabolic acidosis with an increased anion gap. There are common types of lactic acidosis, one being type A lactic acidosis. This is when it is due to tissue hypoxia like shock or ischemia. Then there's also type B lactic acidosis, which is not associated with hypoxia but due to metabolic or toxic causes such as drugs or liver failure. So I want to talk about a pathway. To the left of the screen, I drew a pathway and I just want to cover it with you guys. So glucose can be directed into several different pathways. It can be directed into glycogen production, or it can be utilized in glycolysis, and generally this occurs in the muscles. The end product of glycolysis is pyruvate, and that's essentially where it also begins. So when there's oxygen present, pyruvate can be directed into the mitochondria to undergo the TCA cycle, or the pyruvate can be converted into alanine by the enzyme alanine aminotransferase, or labeled as ALT. So essentially, glutamate can add an amino group to the pyruvate to form alanine, and vice versa. Because this enzyme is a reversible enzyme, alanine can be converted into pyruvate by deamination. Pyruvate can also be acted on by the enzyme LDH, essentially oxidizing NADH to a NAD+ to form lactate or lactic acid. Lactic dehydrogenase oxidizes NADH to NAD+, so that NAD+ can be reused in the glycolysis pathway when there's no oxygen present. Whenever we have oxygen, we can route pyruvate into the TCA cycle. If there's no oxygen present, so anaerobic conditions, we can recycle the NAD H to NAD+ to be used in glycolysis, and we have to use lactate dehydrogenase enzyme to convert the lactate. convert the pyruvate to lactate. And vice versa. The lactate can also be converted into pyruvate under the right circumstances as well. So all of these can lead to the production of lactate or lactic acid. Alanine deamination can lead to the production of pyruvate, which can be rooted into lactate as well. The acid can essentially be dumped into the blood through MCT1, and it can be buffered in the blood and exhaled in CO2, or it can be transferred and taken up by the liver and processed by the same. There are two ways of dealing with the lactate that's produced. It can either be buffered and exhaled as CO2, or it can be taken up by the liver and then processed by the Cori cycle to make glucose by glucose or glucogenesis. So if there's any issues with the liver, we can have a buildup of lactic acid. So this is how the lactic acid is produced and how it is processed in our body, this diagram.